So the fifth condition for argument to work best is a forum. So this just means that there has to be a place for the arguer to communicate the argument to the audience. It could be a physical space, such as an auditorium, a courtroom, a convention center, a classroom, or it could be in media such as magazines, television, radio, and then the internet. The last condition for argument to work best would be audience outcomes. And in this, as I have mentioned previously, successful arguments should produce changes in the audience. But, again, the change may be quite small. And even if it is something as small as just for the audience to realize that this might be a significant issue when they didn't feel that it was previously, or they might feel that it's an issue that people do need to take a stand on. They feel they need to maybe go out and do something about this issue. You know, whatever it might be, there needs to be some change in order for the argument to work best. Then there are some conditions which will just cause arguments to fail. First of all, there's really no disagreement or reason to argue. Somebody might bring up some issue and they express their ideas on it, and they find out that the person that they're talking to or that their audience who's listening to them absolutely agrees with that position that they have. And so there's not going to be a reason for that person to have carried on with that argument. And then there could be risky issues, something that's so sensitive that for the audience perhaps that they can't even start to listen to what someone has to say about it. Right? It's just too hurtful to them, too painful for some reason, possibly. And then it could just be something that's absolutely trivial. You really want to go see a certain movie, and another person says, I don't care, I'll go see anything. Right? Then you're not going to have an argument about it. Then there could be too much difficulty in establishing common ground. You just can't find anything between you and your audience that you can have some agreement on. And then, of course, it seems like that could not be then possible to have an argument at all, except where you could have an argument both sides sticking with their guns and not even hearing what the other person has to say. Or then it could, of course, then escalate into some kind of a standoff, angry feelings, a fight that result in negative outcomes. So instead of being able to just even think a little bit differently about that issue, you're just furious with the other person, or you're just more determined than ever to not hear a thing they have to say. So, of course, then the argument would fail. Then you want to be sure to think about, as you're reading the different essays that we'll be reading this semester, and as well as when you are constructing your own argument, you want to think about ethical and unethical argument. So when you do that, you want to think about an ethical argument in that it is one that approaches issues in insightful, useful, and beneficial ways. Whereas an unethical argument manipulates an audience and may even harm it. So in order to decide if an argument is ethical or not, consider the motive the arguer has to make the argument, as well as the outcome, the consequences or effects on an audience who accepts or follows through on the argument. So, right, you were thinking all the time, people are always trying to persuade you to buy something, right, to part with your money in some way. And so, you need to think about if you're seeing some kind of advertisement, or if you are, if someone is trying to get you to spend your money on something, what is their motive? Are they going to be the ones to profit? Are they going to be the ones really to gain here? And you might come away with nothing or something that's not worth, what you paid for it. And so, think about the motive of that the arguer has. Then as well as then the outcome. What will happen? Right? What will happen if, let's say, if we're still talking about again spending money. Right? If you spend your money in this way that they're trying to convince you is the best way, is it something that would be certain to give you some kind of benefit, or would it be just as likely to give you a very destructive type of outcome, in some way, right? So you would lose your money, and you would not feel like you had gotten anything for it. So there's some things we can think about with 21st century argument. Things have really rapidly changed in the last 20 years, and that mainly has to do with the internet, and then social media, which has led to an explosion in the number and variety of arguments to which we are now exposed. And so social networking tools such as Instagram and Twitter provide us with virtually instantaneous access to each other, allowing us to remain in near constant conversation with counterparts throughout the world. And then along with our 24/7 exposure has come a new way of participating in argument, one that emphasizes browsing or skimming over deeper reflection. And so you know that we're in a very contentious, divided place in our society right now. And the way that people argue over, Facebook, Twitter, all of the ways that we communicate via social networking has made it really easy to do things anonymously, to have, again, we know that there are the trolls out there, we know that there's the bots, and it stirs up, people's emotions, and it makes it hard to know sometimes what is factual and what's not factual, and it has had, again, a very strong effect on the way that people argue. And so some issues then with online arguments. So again, there's the volume, the variety. There's so much information. What should you even pay attention to? You have to think about that first. And then this interactivity. People can make comments on the spur of the moment without thinking things through or considering how their words may affect others. And so again, people can be very cruel, right? And sometimes they're just responding to something that's upset them. Made them very angry, and they're not even thinking how that's going to affect other people. And then authority, credibility, right? Which online sources are reliable? You have to kind of think carefully through this to decide what you might accept as credible and what you wouldn't. And then polarization. The internet has increased the intensity of feelings around issues. People get very heated, on all kinds of different issues. And then those extreme views that people have occupy a more prominent place in our public discussions. So finding that the golden mean, which is kind of the center, being able to come together, even though you don't totally agree with what the other people think about it, but you feel it important, they give up a little bit of what they feel is important, to find that middle ground, that's really been lost through our social media, our online argument. And so this is something just to think about for later. This is not right now that I'm asking you to think about an issue. But again, instead of waiting till the last minute, just kind of be thinking along the way about the issues that interest you and that you would be interested in researching and writing about. So, think about the issues that are compelling to you, to others you know. Remember that issues often originate in dramatic life situations. Again, let's say someone in your family has been very ill and you didn't have insurance and you got these huge hospital bills, and you then start thinking that healthcare is a really important issue, and it may be that we should have universal healthcare in the U.S. So, of course, then with the coronavirus, the COVID-19, and how that has affected people's health, that would just be one issue that you could consider might be an important one. That current issues can be linked to enduring issues that have engaged people for ages. So Even though it seems like it's something new, if you look a little bit deeper, you see that this is just part of an ongoing issue that people have come to see in different ways over time, because it affects us differently as time progresses. And then issues are sometimes solved or seem to be solved, but then new ones that are related emerge. And finally, issues seem to be getting more complex. Our society seems to be getting more complex. And so you want to avoid an issue that is too complex for your argument essay, because it's not going to be, that lengthy. Some issues you would need to be able to write a 30-page paper, or it might even require a whole book in order to do it justice. So you don't want to think too big, right? You have to be able to narrow it down somewhat. And of course, there'll be plenty of time for you to be thinking about this before you need to think of your issue that you would propose to write about.